the podcast is about courage, right?
Yeah.
When you came out of college, you could have worked for a big company,
Of
right?
course.
Had your cubicle, sticky notes all over the walls like everybody else did. Um, to go out on your own, to start something, to kind of create,
Mhm.
that was something that was big and important for you and stuff, but that can be scary for some people. Where did you find the courage to go out and say, I'm going to do something different? I'm going to create something.
Um, well, it's why I got into all of this in the first place, right? Like as a kid, you don't think like, how am I going to make money? You just like, what do you want to do? And so ultimately it just came back to it's why I spent all this time and money learning all these things, was to be better at creating things, right? That's it, right? You can, like, you'd be a pretty crappy inventor if you didn't have any engineering training, right? So that's
Yeah.
why I sucked it up and went to an engineering school, and I went and learned all this stuff, even though I never wanted to be, a traditional type of engineer in a cubicle who does this because, and I went to school with many of them, right? There's no knock against people who are like, that's a good stable job with a
Right.
nice, I can do this thing for the next 30 years and have a family, but it wasn't why I did
Yeah.
it, right? And so ultimately, you kind of look the other way on all the scariness of, well, there's no, potentially I might not ever make any money. The money's going to be very, it's going
Yeah.
to come, it's going to go, and it's going to be the hard hours, right?
Sure.
Dedicating your life to something like I have it's a life. I have no work-life balance. My life is just, I make things.
Yeah.
And so it's just, but that's what I ultimately always wanted as a kid. And so
Sure.
that's what
But
I,
that can be really scary for some people. I mean, were your parents entrepreneurs, people in your family? Did you learn that kind of from them?
my dad is, yeah.
Okay.
So my dad's a immigrant from Italy. He came over when he was, I want to say 27, 28 in his late 20s, came to the United States. Um, so he doesn't have like a college degree or anything. And so he came over as an immigrant and did the immigrant thing and started opening up small businesses and parlaying that small business into other small businesses. And he's just always worked for himself.
Yeah.
Probably a bit out of a necessity, but also he's a very, very independent kind of guy. He's very hard headed, blanking on the Italian word for it, but he'd always yell at Michael being so hard headed in Italian. But yeah, it's just like, so yes, there's definitely a lot of that in the DNA, as well as I grew up around it, right? I grew up around somebody who was just, he worked for himself always, right? And it was him, and sometimes my mom worked for him. Sometimes just him and another person, sometimes just him by himself, right? And it's just, so I did grow up around it. I mean, I still get flack from my parents all the time. They're like, stop, knock off all of this and just go take like a $500,000 a year job at Google. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? Right? Like, what are you doing? You turning down huge salaries from big companies
Yeah.
to, fight the power. Like, what are you doing, man? Like,
Right.
so I do get that, but yeah, I mean, and it is scary. Honestly, it's
Sure.
scary all the time. There are multiple times a year where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to make salary and I don't know how I'm going to make rent.
Yeah.
But you do it because you love it, because I don't know any other way, right? Like, it's just like, this is why I did it. It's what I always wanted to do.